Hey everybody, I think we're live. Welcome, I'm Scott DeWitt.
And I'm Cindy Selfe. We're glad to see you all.
We're very glad to see you all. We're here to hold our online office hours. We've had some really great questions come in through email and through some of the discussion forums. We've been listening to the conversations there and picking up on some questions. And our goal here today is to get through some of these questions, and we are planning to, we hope to answer them so that you can have a really great week in the MOOC with us. We are wrapping up assignment 1, and we were well into assignment 2. And so some of these questions are about the overlap between the assignments. We're going to talk a little bit about WEX and peer review and some things that are happening on the discussion forums.
So why don't we go ahead and start with the first question. It is, what is the purpose of assignment 1? Isn't it optional? Why did I do it? So I think I can start with a little bit of thinking about this. We decided to start the MOOC with assignment 1 because it's a personal autobiographical assignment. And since every individual knows the personal best, that's a great way of starting writing classes. I start all my classes that way, so that every individual has something to write about, something they know best about. And then the assignment also is it is an informal assignment, and we made it informal because we wanted to make it low stakes. We wanted everybody to jump in, to have a little bit of fun jumping in, and to practice their writing in a low stakes environment, and then to post that writing assignment to the discussion forum so that the broadest number of people had access to it, and so that you as a participant in the MOOC could see the whole range of participants who posted their writing on the discussion forum. And I think that worked really well. I was impressed with seeing all the different people who wrote and learning about their lives. It certainly inspired me to want to be a more globally aware writer.
Yeah, I think that if you think about the first letter of the acronym MOOC, massive, I think for me what that assignment did and your generosity in posting those to the discussion forum was just seeing the sheer volume of all of the different voices that are in this class. I mean, it was just like overnight those discussion forums became so vibrant and so energized. And so I think that you all started to feel that too. You started to see that I think sometimes you enter an online class and you feel a little alone. There's nothing there, and then all of a sudden, all of this writing started to appear in those discussion forums. So that was really one of our many of our goals in Unit 1 was to get those, not only the personal narrative and to create something that was a little lower stakes, but also to just start filling up those discussion forums with the diversity of voices that are coming in through this class.
And to start appreciating all the different writing experiences of the participants in this MOOC. What a rich context for writing.
And as you know now, if you've started assignment 2 required that we had some material that you could work with. And that material, we really wanted to make sure that we weren't asking you to go out and just read the more formally published kinds of work that we could ask you to read. We wanted you to work with each other's material. And so why did we ask you to do it? We asked you to do it not only for the experience of the assignment, but so that we could actually use that material in assignment 2. And you are all involved in that right now.
Some of you asked why other people were not responding to the discussion board posts, especially in reference to your assignment number 1. You posted on the discussion forum and you didn't think you got enough people looking and responding to your post. So you asked, how do I get more reviews and how do I get more views and replies? And I think there are a couple of answers to that. You want to tackle that question?
Yeah,
Scott?
let me start, and I know that Professor Selfe has some ideas too. So I think that one thing to consider with the discussion forums is that if you look at the interface that Coursera has given us, you see a title of a discussion forum, and then you also see how many people have viewed it, and you see how many people have responded to it. And the first thing I think often happens with a discussion forum is that as I start scrolling through, if I see something has had 54 responses to it, I'm probably going to gravitate toward that because I imagine there's something pretty exciting that's going on there. So there's that kind of natural pull that those threads have, and I think it's quite normal for us to gravitate towards some of those. I think then what we need to figure out is that if mine doesn't have a lot of views or if it doesn't have a lot of responses, how do I get people there? How might I get somebody interested in that particular thread? So the technology works in some interesting ways. If you respond to somebody's post, your name is there as the person who has responded, and the more you respond to other people, the more your name shows up in those threads, and the more your name shows up in those threads, the more people are going to kind of work backwards to figure out who you are. And there's a way that this technology works that they could actually click on your name, and then they can go find some of your original posts. And if you're somebody who's a really generous responder, you're very active in those discussion forums, more than likely people will seek you out and want to read your post, read your writing, and people will start to respond to that. So one of the things that we've noticed is that there's a lot of give and take on the discussion forums, is that the people who do responding are also the people who have posts that people are reading a lot, and they're also responding to that. So one question I might ask is that if you're seeing that not a lot of people are responding to your posts, ask yourself, how much are you responding to other people's? Because I think that sometimes you just need to enter the conversation. You need to become really active in the conversation, and you'll see that people will then start reading your things and responding to your things.
We've described it as that thing you do in stores. You get a pen, you leave a penny, and then you take a penny if you need it. Reciprocal exchange. If you're interested in the ideas of others, if you participate in their discussions, if you help to generate discussions and exchanges around particular ideas, people will go to your post because they know that there's something great happening there. I would also say, here's another idea, you might think about as well, every writer might think about their title and the first couple of lines of their writing, and think about whether that title is appropriate to the content of the message, and also whether it presents a compelling picture of that message, one that invites other writers into the message and really encourages them to read, or whether the message itself provides a hook to draw writers in that first line or two. This is not, I'm not suggesting that you just put a flashy title on or you just include a hook, but I'm saying that if you can make your title and your first sentence appropriately compelling and representative of the good discussion that's going on in your post, then more people will want to read it.
And it's that title that will start to connect people who have similar interests. So if one of my causes is dog rescue or animal rescue, pet rescue, and I start seeing other titles that have that in the title, those words in the title, then I'm more likely to want to read some of those. It brings people together. I think there's one other way that we can think about this concept also of the drawing people in and the give a penny, use a penny concept. So a lot of people in MOOCs are really, really active readers and responders. It's what they see as their favorite role in a MOOC, and they spend a lot of time in those discussion forums. And I would say to people who do that, it would be really generous that if you're looking through and you're seeing some of those threads that show 0 responses or very few views, spend some time there, because you could be you could kind of be the spark. You could get that discussion forum rolling for somebody else if you have the time to respond to it.
When I'm reading, I often go to the entries that haven't had a lot of readers yet, because those are the ones that I think might be a hidden gem. So I like those. I like that strategy too. How about a third question, Professor DeWitt? Do you have any suggestions for how I can select relevant posts for my use in assignment 2, a synthesis? Can you review assignment 2 and actually sort of the 3 leading into assignment 2 and the 3 criterion for
Sure.
assignment 2?
So you've seen in the walkthrough of the video, I say this a number of times, and I'm going to say it again today, is that if you're finding yourself a little stuck with an assignment, probably the best thing you can actually do is to go back and find the prompt. So in the walkthrough videos, I've said there's always that moment where we take the pause, and I've said go find the prompt. Either bring it up on your computer screen, or like I've done here, make a hard copy of it so that you can look at the assignment itself. So, you know, in assignment 1, we asked you to tell the story, to create that narrative of who I am as a writer with a cause. What we're asking you to do with assignment 2 is to put those experiences that you've had in conversation with other writers who write with a cause. And as we've already talked about, the material for that is sitting on the discussion forums. So what we're asking you to do is to write a synthesis of bringing some of these ideas together. How do your experiences relate to the experiences of others? How are they similar? How are they different? How maybe do they seem very different on the surface, but if you dig a little bit deeper, there's actually some very interesting, more subtle kinds of similarities. And how do we actually start to weave these stories together, thinking about their common features and their different features? So the question is, and I could understand this, is like, how do I find those stories that are relevant to my experience, especially when you look at the sheer volume of what's out there. There's a lot out there on the discussion forums. I think that my very first strategy might be, you're probably very, very eager to get started on assignment 2. If you're feeling like you're not sure how to find the relevant stories, allow yourself a little bit of time to do some reading. There's been lots of reading and lots of responding going on. But if you're somebody who hasn't read broadly across the discussion forums, you haven't looked at a lot of those narratives, I think the #1 strategy that I have is to don't panic about not getting started. Take a deep breath when it comes to actually writing assignment 2, and give yourself some time to read. Go out there and just read some of those. And don't feel like you have to pick the first ones that you see. You might read 5 or 6 of them that have absolutely nothing to do with your cause or the way that you think about writing with a cause. Sooner or later, you'll start to stumble on some of them. Or sooner or later, you might start to see, wow, there are 2 of them out there, or 3 of them out there that have a lot in common. They hold together well, and yet my experiences are very different, and that can be your approach for the paper. Here we've got 3 people with similar experiences. Here is my experience, and it's not necessarily the same, and then you can start to search to see ways that they actually might reflect and that they might connect with one another.
I think I love the suggestion, don't be afraid to browse. Don't be afraid to take the time to meet a whole lot of people through their writing. And I think what you're going to find is there's a hugely rich community in this MOOC that you'll find plenty both in common and plenty different in looking at people's stories. And then you can take their stories and you can see what resonates with your own life. And as Professor DeWitt said, it might be things that resonate because they're similar, or things that resonate because you're so different. And that's what the assignment leads you toward. Looking at somebody else's writing, look at your own writing experiences, and then create a synthesis where you compare or contrast or look at those, look at the different experiences and make some sense of them, both the experiences of others and your own experiences.
And I think that those, as you're searching the narratives and you're looking for people, you're looking for the topics, those things that you're going to connect. It could be about the subject matter. So if, for example, if I did want to talk about animal rescue, maybe what I want to do is search those forums for other people who do that kind of work. But it doesn't necessarily have to be about the cause. That doesn't have to be the thing that brings us together. It could actually be, let's say in my narrative where I was writing about this, I found that writing gave me great courage to speak openly about something that I believed in. Well, what you might do is find some narratives where other people have had that same experience, but about very different causes and about very different subjects. But what they have in common is that they were very nervous about speaking out about the subject matter, and writing helped them find that courage. It helped them to find the voice and some confidence to be able to talk about that cause. That would be another way of finding similarities and differences.
Or you might find somebody who started writing very young, and you started writing very recently, and you want to talk about the differences that you think you see or think about or even encounter when writers start at a young age and when they start experiencing the love of writing at an older age.
Talk about Professor Selfe had also talked about some of the review criteria. So should you want to talk about that now, or do you want to talk about that a little bit later?
Well, I do want to say some people have asked the question about the review criteria for assignment 2. And I think now that we've discussed assignment 2, it will become fairly evident to you how that criteria fits in. The first criteria for assignment 2 is for you to rate how well the writer identified meaningful insights and points of connection, shared experiences and common themes, or identified differences for this assignment. So that criteria has to do with looking at the experiences of others, looking at your own experiences, and identifying what it is that you're focusing your synthesis on. The second criteria asks you to rate how well the writer reflected on his or her own personal writing experiences, and then built on that personal experience that they related in assignment number 1 to develop a claim about how personal experiences connected with the experiences of other writers. So that would be criteria 2, and if the author gives examples, provides examples and details about how that connection, how they want to make that connection, what they want to say about that connection, perhaps quoting to show that that connection exists, then I think you'll be able to rate that effort highly. And then criteria 3 is rate how well the writer composed that critical synthesis that brings together personal writing experiences and the writing experiences of others.
Yeah, so, and this is a nice lead-in to another question that we were asked here, and that is to give some general impressions of WEX, the Writers' Exchange. And the question wasn't only like, how do I use it? What is this tool and how does it actually work? But in a lot of ways of why are you asking us to use it? What's driving this? Why are you asking us to do some of the things that that WEX asks us to do? So let me give you a little bit of a snapshot of WEX and why we came up with WEX and why we think this is a really useful tool in a writing class. So the basis of WEX is peer review. And peer review is simply when people in a writing class or a writing group or maybe in a workspace exchange writing with one another and they provide feedback to one another. And our thinking is that we all remember when we were very young teachers, some of that early time that we first started teaching, and we remember we all have the same experience where we say, I think I learned the most about writing in my very first year of teaching when I was figuring out how to tell other people how to improve their writing. I was giving feedback to my students, and that made me think very critically about my own writing. And so we decided to make that kind of the foundation of WEX, and to pull back the curtain a lot about what we do as instructors. and to give you the opportunity to have that same experience we had when we were very young teachers. What is it that you can learn about your own writing by giving feedback to the other writers in the class? Now, of course, this is an exchange. Everybody wins. As a writer, you're going to get really great feedback. Other people are going to give you feedback on your writing. And as a writer, your writing is going to improve because you're going to think very reflectively and critically about writing because of the advice that you're going to give to your peers in the class. Now, in a MOOC, a massive open online class, we have hundreds, sometimes thousands, depending on the class, students who are enrolled. And so what we don't want to do is just turn you loose. We don't want to just say, oh, well, here's three papers, provide some advice, and move on. It requires a lot of structure and a lot of thinking to provide good feedback. So our second goal with WEX is to provide that training to you. You'll get that training by using the WEX guide. This is a very short guide. It's in a lot of ways the textbook for the class that's going to teach you how to do the peer review. It's going to talk to you about why we think it's important. It's going to give you some strategies for doing peer review. For example, every time you're asked to respond to a piece of writing about a particular topic, you're going to be asked to do three things. You're going to be asked to describe what you're reading. You're going to be asked to assess what you're reading. And then you're going to be asked to provide some suggestions to the writer. These are things that as writing teachers we do every time we respond to a piece of writing. We don't jump right in and say we think it's good or bad. We don't want to pass that kind of quick judgment. We take a lot of time reading and thinking and then describing the writing that we're going to respond to before we offer an assessment of what we think its strengths and weaknesses are. And we're going to ask you to do those two things. And it's not until we do those two things that we then think about, well, what kind of suggestions? How do we actually tell this writer to think differently about writing or about revising that particular piece of writing? So the WEX guide is going to tell you about those strategies, and there's going to be a practice module in the WEX guide. And we think that this is incredibly important for you to follow. It's just immensely important to the success of the class. And in this training module, you'll actually, before you actually ever look at a peer's piece of writing, you're going to have the opportunity to go through a practice run. There's a student paper there. There's a model paper. You're going to be able to mark that paper. You're going to be able to go through the describe, assess, suggest format that we're suggesting. And then once you're finished with that, then you'll get to compare it to what we consider kind of the expert model, somebody who actually has also gone through that. And you can see what are the relationships between how you responded to that paper and the response that's in the WEX guide. And you can figure out what you need to do differently, or maybe you're actually really on target with the way that you're offering those kinds of responses. Now, the WEX guide, I can't emphasize enough how important it is before you start the review. We believe also that students, while they're working on assignment 2, that reading the WEX guide can actually help you write assignment 2. That it will actually help you. If you think about the way that somebody's going to review your writing, it helps you also then to generate that piece of writing in the first place. So I don't think it's something that you should wait until the end of this week to read. I think it's important to start reading it now. Read it while you're doing. Absolutely make sure you finish the training module and everything that the WEX guide is asking you to do before next week. And it's next week then that you will start to have the opportunity to respond to each other's writing.
But I would also go back and revisit the WEX guide during the course of the MOOC if you ever start to feel uncertain about how to respond. I think sometimes going back to that document will help. And I would also say that it's the experience that Professor DeWitt just described that is the philosophical heart of this whole MOOC. Our goal is to help you become better readers of your own text and better readers of others' texts, and thus better. So that's the goal that we try and pursue as a community. And the other thing I think that happens is we provide you some instruction on how to go about that, becoming a better reader, becoming a better writer. We provide you a system for going about that particular process. And then we provide you scads of practice opportunities for that, because we have you write both informally in the discussion forum and formally in the assignments you're going to hand into WEX. And each one of those opportunities will be the chance to think about how you read others' texts and your own texts, and through that thinking to become a better writer. That's our goal.
And you know, what Professor Selfe was just talking about with practice is going to be so important in WEX, is how many opportunities you're going to have to review each other's writing. So for example, in assignment 2, you are going to be responding to, you're going to be providing feedback to 3 of your peers in the class. So not only will you go through answering 3 questions about a paper, and with each of those questions you're going to do the describe, analyze, suggest, but you're going to do that for 3 different people in the class, and then you're going to do that for multiple assignments throughout the rest of the course, Rhetorical Composing, so that we don't think that this is something you're going to learn in one take, in one shot. You're really going to have to practice this. This is a developed skill, and we think that in this, by following the WEX guide and completing this class, that you will gain incredible experience in responding to each other's writing. The WEX will take you through the steps necessary for completing a review. It will involve responding to a peer's text, the assignment that they've submitted. You'll also then be asked to write a reflection about the reviews that you get in return, the people who have responded to your writing. And then you'll be also asked to provide what we call a helpfulness score to the person who reviewed your paper. It's an exchange. You'll see this a lot in the WEX guide. We talk about the exchange. Just like we were talking about the give and take in the discussion forum, this is another form of the give and take. It's going to be happening in WEX. And the WEX, the interface of WEX will explain to you all of those steps. And then in addition to that, we have a document that has snapshots of the WEX interface. It has all of the instructions. It is on the Coursera page. You can find that, and it will guide you through, if you are uncertain about how to use the interface, it'll guide you through every single step. And then in addition to that, you'll see another video linked to the Coursera for this assignment, where I'm actually talking again about the value of WEX and why it is that we're asking you to use WEX as the peer review platform.
Now, as you can tell from what Professor DeWitt said, we think that becoming a better peer reviewer is not a natural born skill. Some of you asked, am I ready to be a peer reviewer of somebody else's prose? And I would say to that, it's not that you're ready right now. We don't expect you to be born with this particular skill set. We expect to provide some instruction with this skill set, some strategies for undertaking this peer review, some much practice in undertaking that peer review. And through that whole process that happens multiple times during the course of the MOOC, you will become a better peer reviewer, a better reader of your own and others' prose, and because of that, a better writer in general. So it's, I don't want anybody to think they're not a good enough writer to be a peer reviewer. I would say to you, be willing to learn the system of peer review, and you will become a better peer reviewer, and you will become a better reader, and you will become a better writer of others' texts and of your own text. So give it a little bit of time, hang in there, be patient with the process. No one becomes good at this overnight. It takes a while to get into the swing of things. So give yourself some time, give yourself plenty of opportunities to practice, and then when we finish in 8, 9, 10 weeks, I want you to look back and see what's changed, how you've changed as a reader, a peer reviewer, a writer, and I'll bet you'll see a lot of change in a positive direction.
and everybody is starting. We're all at the same place. Everybody's at the same starting place. We all bring different strengths and weaknesses, but everybody is experiencing WEX for the very first time, and you're learning these skills. And I love watching this process. People get better. They clearly become better reviewers throughout the course.
And they feel better about what they can do. They have more strategies, more tactics at their fingertips to undertake this reading and this peer review. And that always makes you feel more confident.
Now, one thing we did see happen last year a lot in the discussion forums that I thought was pretty interesting is that there were people who thought that they could enter WEX without reading the WEX guide. And we knew that was going to happen. That those kinds of things happen. And but what was really interesting is the conversation then that popped up on the discussion forums is that people started to say, I received some reviews and I could tell that this person hadn't read the WEX guide. They didn't follow the pattern. They didn't do what was being asked of them. And then this whole conversation started to emerge about the WEX guide, and everybody started to agree that the reviews are better, their experiences are better if everybody would go back and follow what was laid out in the WEX guide, and then review it throughout the course. That you don't have to read it just once. And that wasn't the teachers saying that. We weren't saying anything about it. That was the people in the class. That whole conversation emerged out of those discussion forums on its own.
But there is a reason we teach this particular system. We teach this particular system because we think it works the best for teaching reading, peer review, writing. All our experiences give us the impression and the data to say this is what works for our teaching. So we hope it will work for your learning as well. Now there's one of the questions that participants asked of us was, why should I post my assignments to discussion forums if I've already posted them to WEX? What's the difference between WEX and the discussion forums? You want to try that one?
I think there are many, many differences. So let's talk about just some simple differences. So when I post to WEX, there will be 3 people whose work I'm asked to respond to. I receive 3 papers, and I'm asked to do that peer review of those 3 people. And that's all I'm asked to do right off the bat. And so more than likely there's a time window there, and I'm probably going to stop with those 3. It's also anonymous peer review. So I don't know whose papers those are that I get, and those people will not know that I'm the person who did the responding. There's some real value to that. We think that there's a bit of the anonymity can lead to people feeling a little more open to offer some feedback to writing, and so that's what's going to happen in WEX. In a discussion forum, the value of the discussion forum is all of that's happening in the public sphere. And that I might have 3 people read what I've put out there, but I also might have 300 people read what I've put out there. And it goes back to where these office hours started today, about that notion of getting the conversation maybe to even out across some of the posts in the discussion forum.
And remember what we said, there's no guarantee that 300 people are going to read your post. But if you engage with others, if you start mixing up in the conversations and exchanging ideas, if you use a compelling, if you offer a compelling idea and a compelling conversation, if you use a title that accurately describes your content and a hook that might get readers into your discussion, you're more than likely going to have some responses for your writing. Now that doesn't always happen, because sometimes posts just happen at a time when a lot of people are busy or they're doing other things, but often it does happen. If you engage with others' ideas, they will end up engaging with you, with yours.
So another difference that comes to mind is the formality of the two spaces. So WEX is very structured. It's very step-oriented. It tells you what you're supposed to do at a given time. It gives you very formal instructions. It also tells you, it gives you the questions that you should be using to guide the peer review that you're doing. And there's a reason for that. That's about the curriculum. Those are about the outcomes for the assignment. There's a reason why we've really structured that. There really is no structure in the discussion forums other than you're putting your writing out there. The direction that the conversation takes is entirely up to the people who decide to respond. And the value of that, this is a writing MOOC, so we hope that the conversations at some point are also about writing. But what's interesting about those discussion forums is that sometimes the conversation really is about the subject matter, or sometimes people figure out that they have very similar experiences. And sometimes those discussions can kind of branch off into some really, really interesting topics. And WEX doesn't really allow that. That's not the purpose of WEX. WEX is very structured. It's very much about the curriculum of the course, and the discussion forums offer you some freedom. Again, we hope that conversations about writing are happening there, but it also affords an opportunity for other conversations to take place.
Well, there's one more question that people did ask that I think we ought to address, and it's about the level up experiences that we offer in the MOOC. Somebody asked, how will the level up experiences make me a better writer? And my own response to that is that many of the level up experiences allow you to practice your writing in a different context or in a different way, and therefore broaden or deepen your writing skills and your writing practices. So, for example, several of the level up experiences ask you or challenge you to take your writing outside the MOOC and publish it in a more public forum where people all over the world can respond to your writing. So, for example, when we ask you to post your narrative about who I am as a writer with a cause in the digital archive of literacy narratives, we were challenging you to publish that narrative in a repository that is global in nature. So anybody can see that narrative and they can think about it. And you have taken the risk of putting your ideas out there on a big stage and getting some sense of what it means to publish, to think about what you're going to say, to write and craft your text, and then to put it out there on a global stage. Other level up experiences will ask you to deepen or enrich your practice in writing in a different way, but in a nonetheless effective way, and encourage you to practice something in the level up experience that you're not able to do quite in the same way during the regular MOOC experience.
You'll see the level up assignments will unfold throughout the course. Every time we start a new assignment, more of them will become available to you. And so you can review those and decide which ones are most appealing to you and which ones you might want to participate in, or maybe you would like to try a couple but you're not necessarily interested in using them to get to the certificate of completion with distinction. That's entirely up to you. That's part of the openness of a MOOC, but we're going to offer you a lot of opportunities to level up, and we hope you take some of those challenges.
And we love to see when you level up. Often, if you're publishing your writing in a different venue or a different place, we love to learn about it because we want to go there and we want to see what you've done in that different context, a YouTube video or a narrative in the DALN or whatever. We want to be able to go there and see how you've approached that challenge and how you've responded to it.
And what a great topic for a discussion forum. So if you put something out there and it generates some responses, it generates a conversation, come back to the MOOC and tell everybody about it so we can have a conversation about that.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, you can see probably back here, you've seen our friend Chad Iwerts, who's been here, and over here on my other shoulder is Mike Lancato, who's been helping us. You remember meeting them last time. I'm wondering if any other questions came in, or if you think of anything that maybe we should still address?
Yeah. I have a question for you all about the importance of synthesis. Why are we teaching synthesis, or why are we asking students to learn and use synthesis in the second assignment?
Well, for me, synthesis represents the connection between one piece of information and other pieces of information. It represents the attempt to make some sense out of individual pieces of data by putting them together and looking for patterns or trends or likenesses, similarities, differences. So that act of synthesis is also, for me, an act of making sense beyond one particular case, by looking at other cases and how they relate to that case. I think that act of making sense, of synthesizing experience, is one of the most important things writers can do, because it keeps you from writing only for yourself. It helps you to think of audiences and their concerns and their interests, like in the discussion forum, for example. So synthesis, to me, is at the very heart of rhetorical composing.
And I think, for me, synthesis is hard. It's much easier to say, person number one said this, and person number two said this, and person number three said this, the end. That's really very easy to do. Yeah. Synthesis is trying to figure out, what are these three people saying that, and it's not only what do they have in common, or maybe how are they different, but when I start bringing them together, what kinds of new ideas emerge? What is the new meaning that comes out of that experience? And I think, as a writer myself and somebody who does research, I think that for me, synthesis, as difficult, sometimes it can be very challenging. It's also the really exciting part of synthesis is when, if I have 1, 2, and 3 and they're completely separate entities, they sometimes can look like they have nothing in common. It's so exciting as a writer when you actually start to weave things together, and you start to see that actually two things that seem to be very, very different actually do have something in common, or vice versa. Two things that seem on the surface to be nearly identical, when you dig a little deeper and you try to bring them together, you start to understand really how very different they are. And that's really, for me, the excitement of writing and of making meaning and creating knowledge.
And it's one of the hardest parts of writing. I think I agree with Professor DeWitt here. A lot of people are contented with stopping after they've described a single instance, but it's that making sense by putting instances in conversation with one another and coming up with a new way of seeing things. It's the real challenge. I'd like to see all of you try and think about that as you work through the rhetorical composing MOOC.
And I will repeat this again, that there's also a further discussion of this in the WEX guide. The practice run that you'll go through is working with a paper that is working with synthesis, so you'll have a further opportunity to think about it there. Did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I guess just that synthesis is something that you have to do all the time. In order to navigate our world, you're always exposed to information that you have to find a way to make sense of. All these different component parts of our reality. You have to figure out a way to turn into a meaningful whole. And so to practice that in your writing, you can take that, you can develop that synthesis skill, and then apply it to the rest of the world.
Yeah, sometimes we do things, we know how to do things through the sheer practice, but we don't recognize that we know how to do those things until we actually articulate what synthesis is, or what the value of synthesis is. And so by articulating that task and looking at it and practicing it, we can make ourselves aware of how valuable that synthesis practice is, and come away with a deepened understanding of what we do every day, but maybe don't notice all that much.
I think too, maybe to add.
Just want to move a little closer, because I'm afraid we're not going to pick your sound up here, and I don't want to block out Mike here. There we go. We can rearrange.
Yeah. I was just going to add too. It's
it's interesting in the context of the MOOC that you're synthesizing other readings of other people that you're synthesizing essentially. So you're kind of building a community of readership right there. And earlier we talked a little bit about what if nobody's reading any of the posts that I have. It's an interesting opportunity to be able to talk about other posts that you have read and draw in other readers.
Great idea.
And posting it again to the forums as opposed to just within WEX. It's a cool opportunity to build a group of readership right there.
So I love that, thinking about your discussion, challenging yourself to make your discussion forum posts synthetic, right? Bringing together of looking at the relationships between people. I think that's a terrific challenge. Yeah.
There was one other question that I saw that had come in that we might address now. It's a little early, but someone had asked what happens if they are unable to meet the deadline for submitting their second assignment, if that disqualifies them from getting a certificate of completion or achievement.
It's a great question. So here's, I guess, another difference between WEX and the discussion forum is that WEX is on a very tight schedule. So if you start to look at the syllabi and you start to look at the syllabus and you start to look at the assignment prompts and the listing of what you have to do, you're always going to see windows of when WEX opens, meaning that you have the opportunity to submit, and then you have when WEX closes where things have to be finished. And because we're on a set schedule, WEX requires us to meet all of those deadlines. And so there might be an instance when you know, life happens, things get busy in your life, and you realize that you're not going to make one of those deadlines. So there is an additional assignment at the end of the course, so that if you were to miss one of the assignments that is being counted toward the certificate of completion, there is an additional assignment that you can do to make up for that. But that does only allow you to miss one of the assignments. And if, you know, because the course eventually has to end, we all have to say goodbye to each other, we do have to have a final deadline. And so we do have to, you know, at some point close the gates on some things. So I wouldn't, I think that the best advice I can give you is really to try to stay on top of every single assignment, and then to realize there are two other ways of looking at things. That if you miss an assignment, there's an additional one where you can make things up. And then if for some reason you've had difficulty meeting more than one of those deadlines, again, I think this is where I return to the idea of the openness of a MOOC. Is that, you know, you could ask yourself the question of, you know, should I continue in the class? Can I still benefit from this class, even if I might not be getting the certificate of completion? And I think all of us would agree, of course you can, but that's a question that you can answer for yourself, and what you might want to do with the course will be offered again, we hope, and you'll have that opportunity to take it down the road.
There's also one more thing you could do if you miss the windows of opportunity for submitting and reviewing and reflecting in WEX, and that is you can post your writing to a discussion board and ask people to give you feedback on it, even though you weren't able to submit it to WEX. Now, because the discussion boards are informal and because people are not required to respond in those boards, you may get, who knows what kind of response you'll get. But I think if you put it out there and you ask people, and you've been good in responding to people, I think you might get some real response in the discussion forum. And I also think that if people have developed the habits of responding systematically to texts in WEX, they might give you a really valuable response in the discussion forum. So I wouldn't rely on that solely, but in case you miss a deadline, I think that might provide another informal opportunity to get some feedback.
And I guess, you know, also to another piece of advice is watch those dates, watch those times. The deadlines are set, but I don't think that any of the deadlines are going to surprise you. They shouldn't surprise you. They shouldn't come out of nowhere. We've given ample time for those deadlines. So you'll start also seeing people in the discussion forum will start talking about the deadlines also, and they just serve as really helpful reminders.
They're especially good if you're the kind of writer who works in the world where you have deadlines for your writing. It gives you a sense of having to write for a particular time and not being able to go into a piece of writing and make it absolutely perfect. That will never happen. You have a limited set of time. You have to get something in by a deadline. And I think that's good real-world writing experience.
Great. I think that's about it, folks. Thanks for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you on the discussion forums, and then any future office hours will be announced, and we hope to see you there also.
Right
Bye, everybody.
on.
So long.